Welcome back to another episode of Real Women, Real Talk. If you've been watching, if you watched the last episode, you're like, she has on that jacket again. I think I'll keep wearing this jacket because I want to remind you, in case you're not having a beautiful day, you are beautiful because of who God created you to be. I want to remind you, last week, Barbara shared some of her story with us. He's not doing it to me, he's doing it for me. How she shared in her grief, and you can be angry with God, duplicitous living. She shared so much with us about her journey. This week, we're going back. We're going to dig a little bit deeper into hearing her journey with getting to know the living God in her life in the midst of what some of us would call a little bit of chaos. We've all had chaos. And I'm so glad God does not leave us in the chaos. He comes to bring shalom. I hope you will be blessed today. In the midst of your grief, and I hope everybody hears me on this, in the midst of the grief, and I was talking to a sister recently who's in the midst of grief. One of the things people say to her is, I still see God in you. In the midst of your pain, in the midst of you asking God why, in the midst of all that, I'm still seeing God in you. Did Fern, you think Fern still saw God in Barbara?
He did. I can't tell you exactly when the switch clicked for him, even in choosing the name for Eli, which Elijah, Jehovah is my God, you know, even then he was proud of it. So it almost made me question this: do you really not believe in God? When the baby was born, we went to the church I grew up in, we presented the baby, do you really not believe in God? But I wasn't in a place to, or I thought at the time I wasn't in a place to kind of push that on him. Like, how can I push God, in his face if me, myself, I'm pulled away from God? So I think it was just a matter of little by little, the little bit that I would talk about God, or the things that were important to me, such as marriage, such as the name of my child, such as presenting my child to God. Mm-hmm. Those things, So I think somewhere along those lines it clicked for him, until the point where, I would hear him say, yes, thank God, or I'm okay, thank God, or thank God we have this business. So he started little by little thanking God, to the point where he started his desire to know God was coming out of him. So, but again, at that point, once again, I'm scared, because my relationship with God was always through my mom. So how savvy really was I to educate my husband about God?
Okay.
And in the midst of all of this, so I had to do therapy along the way. But again, I'm not dealing with my grief. I'm dealing with my life day by day. So I'd have my outbursts. I've had my tantrums. I'd fight with Fern. Just because I would blame everything on him. I would, at times, I would think to myself, what am I doing? I shouldn't even be doing this. And, I had all these things where I wasn't dealing with grief. Then I thought, baby number 2, oh, here we go, perfect. I'm good. I'm happy. And I was happy, but there was still that just deep-rooted grief that I had going on. So it got to the point where I fell so deep in depression that I could not just ignore it anymore. And my husband, Fern, he is the most patient man, and he will try to please me and try to help me in any way that he can. So he would just go with whatever flow I was with, and he would try to help me. And he wouldn't overstep. He would just kind of go with it. And I got to a point where when people would ask me, how are you? I already have Enzo and Eli, so now I have my 2 kids. Now some years have passed. People would ask me, how are you? And I would just burst out crying.
Because by now your mother has been deceased.
Now it's been 3 years.
3 years. And so still, you weren't dealing
I was not.
with the grief. Mm-mm. You were just suppressing it, or either reacting in a way because you were not dealing with the grief. I want you to continue, but you reminded me of a quote that I wanted to share. I saw it on Instagram, and I took a picture of it from a counselor. And she said this, that I think is profound. She said, people tend to believe that grief shrinks over time.
Mm-hmm.
What really happens is that we grow around our grief.
Yeah.
When I saw that, it's, I've had my season of grieving recently. I saw that and I was like, that's so true.
Mm-hmm.
The grief doesn't shrink. We grow around it.
Mm-hmm.
But the word that gets me is grow around it. And so now you're realizing that the grief isn't going anywhere. You haven't been dealing with it. Now you got to learn to grow around it. So what was the next step that you took?
Well, it's funny because growing around it, I can see that, but I feel like I was growing with my grief. I felt my grief kept getting bigger and bigger, but I just had to keep going day by day. When I gave birth to both my kids, the first thing, I'm there with my newborn baby I had just given birth, and all I'm doing is crying because I'm so happy, but all I keep saying is I want my mom.
Mm-hmm.
The day I found that I was pregnant, I remember Fern and I call him upstairs. I show him, this is the first time with the pregnancy test. I'm crying. That entire night that we found out I was having Elijah, I cried on his chest, and all I kept saying was, I want my mom. I want my mom. I want my mom. And it repeated itself. When I gave birth, both times, and it was, my best friend was in the room, and she says it was the single most emotional thing she's ever experienced. Mm. And I told her I couldn't even help it. It was just like, I'm so happy, but I want my mom. And that's how it was, or that's how it is. So grief for me, and that's why I tell you, it feels like it grew bigger and bigger, because even though, yes, I was growing, I became a mother, I became a wife, a business owner, and I was learning all these things to become a grown-up, right? Ultimately, and at the same time, I was happy for every moment, but I was sad for every moment. Mm-hmm. So first Christmas, oh yay, it's my baby's first Christmas, I wish my mom was here.
Yeah.
Birthday, yes, it's birthday, I wish my mom was here. It's just a constant reminder of, she's not here. Mm-hmm. She's not experiencing this. I don't have her here with me. What would my mother say? What would my mother do? So it was just that growth, but grief was also growing. So it got to the point where it was so intense. My depression was at an all-time high. And so when I finally realized, this is beyond just, a little sadness or a little grief or a little, what we'll say depression, because we self-diagnose ourselves. Oh, I feel depressed. Yeah. Oh, I feel, but really, what do you consider depression, So I remember, I'll never forget, because it was like, I think Cinco de Mayo, we went to my brother's house. My sister-in-law, she's Mexican. So we go to my brother's house, and I was pale. I was so pale that day. I didn't even, put makeup on, nothing. Just put on some shorts, and I was out. And my brother looked at me, and he's like, how are you? And I just looked at him back, and like my tears came out. He's like, you're not okay. I was like, I'm not okay. And I remember that was the defining moment of, I need help. Mm. I need help. And I need something big. I need something now. I was terrified. I mean, I wasn't, suicidal at that time or anything like that. I just became very paranoid, very, very fearful of like death. I thought that if, I wasn't keeping an eye on my kids, like they're gonna die. Like, it was so bad. And I just, at that moment, I couldn't even find joy in anything I was doing.
You know what? That's something you say that, because in my losing my brother, that was something that happened, and I lost my brother in October, 3 days before my birthday, 2020. And I started realizing there was this fear of death thing. It was like it was just looming. Yeah. Like I was wondering, okay, is death coming to get me too? Mm-hmm. And unless you've walked through that, people don't understand. They don't understand it.
They'll think you're suicidal.
And it's like you get in the car and it's like, well, it's today my day. It's just like this fear, or then you start fearing other people you love. What's going to happen to them? Are they going to be okay? Is my sister okay now? And it's like this thing. If my phone rings, and
Bad
I don't,
news.
it's bad news. Well, I don't care that I'm busy.
Right.
If it's my sister, I have to answer it because I have to know
Right.
that she's okay. It's like this fear comes just overwhelmingly so, and then anything you're joyful about, you feel 100% guilty.
Yeah.
Like you don't deserve to be joyful, and you're thinking, well, that's wrong because they're not here to enjoy it. So I just had to, yeah, I agree with you. I so can identify with that.
Well, so the thing is, I lost my father when I was 12. He died in a motorcycle accident. He had just turned 40. It was 8 days after his birthday. And then fast forward, I'm 12, fast forward to 21. Now I lose my mother. She was 45 years old. You know, beautiful, young, healthy. All she ever had was migraines, which turned out to be the death of her. But, so yeah, I had that. And then when I have my kids, I don't trust anyone.
Yeah.
I couldn't lose just one moment from seeing them. It was a lot. My brother, so it's funny, we handled our griefs totally different. I was grieving and just trying to suppress it, ignore it, trying to live day by day. My brother turned into an alcoholic. He was going out. I had to call Ubers at 4 a.m. to get him home because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, again, my brother, which to me is my backbone. So it was a lot. So at that moment, my brother, he's better now. But at that time, when he tells me, he's like, you're not okay. I'm not okay. That was that day. The following day, I looked into a therapist.
Good.
I used to work with clinical doctors, psychological clinical doctors. And I wrote to my boss and I was like, Dr. So-and-so, do you have any recommendations? And I told her, I was honest. I was like, it's for me. Which day, by the way, where I used to work prior to getting pregnant with Eli, they are psychologists. So they kept up with me, trying to, but I just didn't want to deal with it. Yeah. And they were my bosses, which became my friends. So it was kind of like they couldn't really give me therapy, but they would check up on me. Mm-hmm. So she referred me to someone good. And I started seeing this therapist. And I remember she considers herself a Catholic. But finally, when we got to the breakthrough of my therapy, she told me, she's like, I guess I had mentioned several times, things about God and about prayer. And I told her how I'd get in my car and I would still pray. And she's like, yeah, but you're not really praying. She's like, you're just kind of like just following through, a routine. She's like, you're not really praying. She's like, you've done everything. The only thing we haven't covered is your prayer, your relationship with God. And I looked at her and I was like, Dr. So-and-so, I don't think I want to, get into that. She's like, okay, well, you let me know when you're ready. We kept talking. It came up in another session, and she tells me, she's like, I think that you need to understand you can be mad at God, and you can tell him that you're mad at him. Again, this non-believer is telling me this. And so she's like, you get to tell me what is it that you're feeling. And I tell her, I'm upset. I used another word. I was like, I'm just furious with him. How could he do this to me? Why did he do this to me? Everything was, She's like, okay, so when you have some time, you're going to go, and you're going to go in a space where you're alone, and you're going to tell him this. And so sure enough, I went into our guest bedroom, and I just, oh man, I thought he was going to disown me. I know that God does not, but I
You let God have it.
I did. And I was very upset with him. And I cried so much that day. I remember I just couldn't get myself up from the floor. And I just kept telling him, I was just a child. And I started going through everything. You did this to me. You did that to me. That wasn't enough. Years passed, then you do that to me. So I was just going through it. I was full on attacking him. And it's crazy because all of that, finally, I don't know how much time passed. I got up, I breathed. I can't even explain to you the way that my breathing changed.
Oh, wait a minute. That's good.
it was just something changed, something shifted. Same way I had been bottling up all that grief all those years, I was bottling up my relationship with God and my anger with God. And when I finally let him have it, it almost felt like he was laughing. Like I thought, like laughing, like, okay, are you done? Like if that's how I felt.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you feel good now? Like you done now? All right, let's hug. Like that's how I felt. And from that moment forward, my therapist, shortly after that, she's like, I think, you know what? I don't see a reason why we need to continue. She's like, if you want to continue, we'll do bi-weekly or we'll do once a month, whenever you want to check in. She saw me change. She claims that she might face everything. She's like, you are night and day.
But I believe that. And I think, I pray that if whoever's listening to this will pass it on to the next person, because that's crucial. Because when you got into that place where you were willing to be honest with God, there was an exchange. I know you were blessed by Barbara's testimony and sharing the many areas of her life today. Listen, as we talked about grief, I could so identify sitting there with her as I'm in a season of grief. And I loved how she talked about, things happen that are joyful, but you don't feel joy. You feel guilty about feeling joy because your loved one isn't here with you. Grief can be overwhelming. And as I heard one counselor say, you grow around your grief. You never stop missing the person that's left you here on this side. You long to see them again. The memories are still there, but you learn to grow around your grief. Barbara shared that today. And I don't know exactly what you're grieving about. Perhaps it isn't losing a loved one from this earth. It could be the loss of a marriage, a relationship, dreams, hopes. There's so many ways in which we grieve. But I pray you have been encouraged to know that the living God steps into that grief with us. And he lets us know he will never leave us. He will never forsake us. That he is a comforter. I love Isaiah 41:10, even that says, fear not, for I am with you. Don't be afraid. Don't be dismayed. I'm here for you. I will help you. I will strengthen you. I'll uphold you with my righteous right hand. He is here for us. Don't forget that. We hope to see you next time on Real Women, Real Talk. Thank you for joining us. Remember, like the video, as well as share the video and subscribe to the channel. Let us know what you think in the comment section below. You can also email us at womensministry@crcconline.org. We'll see you next time.